Hi everyone, I'm Claire Saffitz. Welcome to my home kitchen. Today I have a special recipe for Halloween. I'm going to make a pumpkin bread with a black cocoa and pumpkin seed streusel. So here I'm doing a play on like orange and black colors for Halloween, but more than that, it's really just a super simple recipe, fun to make with kids, comes together really fast, no special equipment, be in the oven in 20 minutes. Love Halloween, think it's a great holiday. I do like the baking you can do on Halloween. Like when I was a kid, we would make sugar cookies with my mom and stuff. So really fun holiday to celebrate. And the color palette lends itself really well to baking. So I have ingredients for the batter on this side and the streusel on this side. This is sort of a variation on a recipe that's in Dessert Person. I have a kabocha squash bread, like tea cake, and so this is slightly tweaked from that, but I'm using canned pumpkin instead of kabocha because I don't want to have to, like, it's just easy to open a can of pumpkin and pumpkin for Halloween. 1 cup of canned pumpkin, all-purpose flour. This is a neutral oil. I'm using avocado. You could use vegetable. 2 large eggs, some maple syrup, trying to sort of flavor it for fall, kosher salt, baking powder, and then I have a mixture of warm spices here. I have cinnamon, ground ginger, and a pinch of clove. And then I'm also adding a teaspoon of turmeric, and that's gonna really help to make that orange color pop that I have from the pumpkin. And granulated sugar, vanilla extract also, I always forget that. So then for the streusel, I have some cubed butter that's cold, all-purpose flour, some kosher salt, demerara sugar. You could use brown sugar or granulated sugar if you don't want to use demerara, pumpkin seeds, and then 2 tablespoons of black cocoa. So black cocoa is sort of a specialty ingredient. You can order it online. You can often find it in like a cake, a baking store, or like a cake decorating store. It is a type of cocoa powder that's been very heavily alkalized. So it's been treated, it's been like neutralized, the acid. When you do that process like multiple times, it turns it this really, really dark color. That's where we're gonna get that color contrast with this like vibrant, turmeric, brightened interior plus this like black cocoa streusel on top. Special equipment, very minimal. I'm gonna use a standard size loaf pan and a couple bowls, and like literally that's it. This is a type of quick bread, so it's an oil-based cake that you can make by hand. So it's very, very easy. I'm just gonna use a bowl and a whisk. So the first thing I'm gonna do actually is preheat my oven. So I have an oven rack in the center. This is gonna bake at 350. This is labeled veg oil. This is actually avocado. That's what I'm using in the batter. So I'm gonna use that to grease my pan. I pretty much just use whatever fat I call for in the recipe. And I'm using parchment paper. That's your best tool for getting it out of the pan, especially when you have a topping like a streusel, where you don't wanna invert it and then you end up knocking a bunch of the streusel off of the cake. I'm using a pastry brush. You can use your fingertips, just coating it in a light layer of oil. And the oil is really there just to actually give the parchment paper something to stick to. So I have a piece of parchment that I trimmed so that the width of the piece is the same as the length of the pan. And this is just gonna go right in, and then smooth out the parchment to eliminate any big air pockets. Then you can go in and add a little bit of oil to the parchment also. Okay, this is done. I'm gonna set this aside. So the next thing I'm gonna do is make the streusel. Streusel is basically a mixture of like flour, sugar, and butter that's been rubbed together until you get these crumbs. This is just all-purpose flour. Then demerara sugar. I like demerara sugar in streusel because it's really crunchy, and that's the texture that I want. But again, you can substitute the same quantity of just granulated or brown. Kosher salt. Then I'm gonna add my pumpkin seeds. These are just raw pumpkin seeds. Because they're gonna sit on the surface of the cake as it bakes, they will kind of toast, or at least the ones that are exposed to the dry heat of the oven will toast. So I'm not gonna go ahead and toast them now, but you could. You could just buy like roasted salted if you want to at the grocery store. Then my black cocoa. So black cocoa, because it's been treated to turn it that color, it's not like a super intensely flavored cocoa. Like it does sort of have a much more mild flavor than your typical cocoa powder, like especially a raw cocoa powder, which is like fruity and tastes like it comes from a plant. Black cocoa is the flavor of Oreos, or like a really dark chocolate wafer cookie. So now I'm gonna add the butter, mix it all together. And the black cocoa doesn't look like it's doing much now. It just turned that flour mixture gray. But what happens when cocoa hydrates or it comes into contact with moisture is it really darkens quite a bit. So I'm just going to work this mixture with my fingertips. And the idea here is to work the butter completely into the flour mixture so that there's no bits of butter remaining. Basically, it's just coating all the little flour particles and you have this kind of like uniform mixture. So I'm just gonna keep doing this until the butter disappears. The butter is binding all of the dry ingredients, so you should not have a lot of loose flour in the bowl. And you can see that there's been a big color change. It's now this really dark, it looks like dirt. Topsoil, yeah. The seeds in it. So that's your streusel. So this is done. I'm gonna set this aside and then we're gonna mix the batter. The batter for the pumpkin quick bread is very, very easy. I'm gonna mix it all in one bowl. The bowl is too small, I already know this, but all the other ones are dirty. It's just, I'm gonna go with it. So I'm gonna start with the sugar. Typically, quick breads use like a liquid fat. It could be a melted butter, usually it's oil. Even though it's a cake, I don't start with that typical step of creaming together butter and sugar where you're kind of whipping this butter mixture. So I start with sugar and eggs. So I'm gonna do, these are room temperature eggs. And room temperature is a little less important if you're using a fat that's liquid at room temperature, but you still wanna work with room temp ingredients. So I'm just gonna start whisking this together. So I want to whisk this pretty vigorously until the mixture, I don't need like a major transformation, but I'm just kind of looking for it to be a little bit paler and like a little bit grown in volume compared to when I started. Okay, so you can see this mixture is really nice and smooth. Now I'm going to stream in my oil. This is a half cup of neutral oil. You could use like an olive oil if you wanted to. It's going to give a little bit of a different flavor to the recipe, but I think that's totally fine. You could also use melted butter. You could also use like a melted coconut oil. Okay, so I'm streaming it in slowly and whisking because I want it to emulsify into the egg and sugar mixture. It's kind of like, it's not really, but it's emulsifying. So it's sort of like a sweet, like a sweetened mayonnaise or something. I think you get a nicer texture by emulsifying the fat, and you could just dump it in and stir and it would be fine. I mean, really with a quick bread, you could basically put all the ingredients in a bowl and stir and it would be fine. But I like this mixing method. I think it's just, it gives you a really nice and reliable end result. I have 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Maple is a really powerful sweetener. You don't need a lot. It can be a little overpowering sometimes, but just 2 tablespoons really gives it a pretty noticeable maple flavor. And then I'm also gonna add my 1 cup of pumpkin puree. Using the canned stuff is super convenient, but you could do like any kind of like sort of slightly lower moisture squash is great. So whisk that. I'm also gonna add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, the ingredient I love to forget. This bowl is too small. So whisk that until smooth. And now I'm gonna add my dry ingredients. I really wanna mix them first, but I don't wanna get on another bowl. So I'm just gonna mix them really well into my wet ingredients. So this is baking powder. I remember, so many, many years ago, I had the cookbook author and recipe developer Yossi Arafi on the, we made like a pumpkin bread, right? We made like a pumpkin cake. It was so long ago. Yossi's amazing. Check out that episode. And it was from her book, Snacking Cakes. And I asked her, like, do you always mix your dry ingredients first? And she was like, no, I just like put them in the same bowl. So Yossi gave me the courage to do the same. So anyway, the point is, they'll all get kind of mixed up by doing this. When you don't have room to whisk, you can do it this way. So that spices that I added, again, cinnamon, ground ginger, a pinch of ground cloves. Cloves are really strong, so I like to use them sparingly, but like all really nice fall flavors. And then I also included turmeric. It has a distinct flavor, but it's a lot more subtle than your typical ground spice, but it's mostly here for color. Like it's gonna sort of help to maintain this kind of like golden tint in the batter. So I'm just mixing it really, really well, making sure there's no lumps. And now I'm ready to assemble. So I'm gonna grab the streusel in the prepared pan. Obviously batter goes in first. This uses 1 can of canned pumpkin. Canned pumpkin comes in a 15-ounce can, and it might be annoying to have like a scant cup left over. So what you could do is double this recipe. And you could bake it in an 8x8 pan, double the streusel as well, or you could just bake it into 2 loaf pans. It also is the kind of thing where it's like maybe you're giving gifts that time of year for whatever reason. For Halloween, you want to bring something to someone's house, you could make 2. Just gonna smooth this into the pan. So then streusel on top. I like it to be sort of crumb texture. If you have big clumps like that, you can break them up a little bit. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this over top. I just found an unincorporated piece of butter, stirring that in. And it's gonna feel like a lot of streusel, but it does bake down a little bit. Then of course the cake itself rises. So go ahead and use it all and make sure you're covering the full surface of the cake. Pumpkin bread, pumpkin cake, it's the same thing. Okay, so now obviously with the color of the streusel, you're not gonna be able to rely on like a golden brown doneness indicator, but we're gonna bake it until the cake underneath is risen and split, and we're gonna just use a cake tester. So this is gonna go for like 45 to an hour. And my oven is already preheated, so I'm gonna get it in. 45, maybe less, maybe 40, we'll see. Or no. I know I'm not so confident how long this is gonna take. I can tell it's not done. Nope.
Not done at all.
45 to an hour. Okay, so here it is. See, there's that little crack in the center. The streusel looks great. It grew quite a bit. And when I do the cake tester in the center, it comes out clean. I also really like seeing how the pumpkin seeds on the surface got really nice and toasty. Nice color contrast. I think it's gonna look really pretty when we slice it. All right, so to let it cool, after 20 minutes, I'm gonna unmold it using the parchment paper, and I'll let it cool fully on a rack. I have my pumpkin cake with black cocoa streusel. It's nice and cooled. I'm gonna take the parchment off and get it onto my cutting board. I'm excited about the color contrast. I feel like it already looks really cool. So I'm gonna slice it down the middle so you can have a nice cross section. Kind of cool, very orange. That turmeric really does help to add a lot of brightness to the overall color. And it's really nicely baked. So there's no like squidginess or under baking, but the crumb is like super moist. If you wanted to like, if you're like having Halloween like at someone's house, you could make little sort of like muffin / cupcakes out of these and do the batter in 12 muffin cups and do the streusel on top. All right, so here's the slice. Great color. Smells really good. You smell some of the maple, smell some of the warm spice in there. I don't think about chocolate and pumpkin being a natural pairing, but the streusel is, with the black cocoa, it's not so chocolatey. It just has its own kind of distinct flavor. And I just love the way the colors look. I'm gonna taste it. Good salt, a little pop of salt in the streusel, not very sweet. Oh, the texture you get from the streusel and those little pumpkin seeds in there.
This is like a snack cake.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And the cake itself is like very silky. Love the color contrast. And also it's hard to beat a recipe that takes 2 bowls and a loaf pan and is baked in an hour. And then you have something that's like super shareable and really festive, perfect for the holiday. So anyway, I want to thank everyone for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and happy Halloween.